Henry, thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you this evening in your group. My name is Louis Foreman. I am a serial entrepreneur. And my journey as an entrepreneur began when I was in college. I went to the University of Illinois. I thought I was going to be a doctor. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, but I got a C in organic chemistry, and I thought maybe I should be looking at something else. I played lacrosse at the University of Illinois, and this is back in the mid 1980s. And I was taking an econ class that semester. And what I learned in econ is that when there is demand for a product or a service, and when the marketplace doesn't satisfy that demand, there should be an opportunity. I was playing lacrosse. There wasn't a local supplier of equipment in Champaign, Illinois. There was no internet, so you couldn't just go on a website and order what you needed. Everything was done in a very analog way. You used mail order catalogs, or you called a toll-free number and placed an order. And so there was demand for equipment. No one was satisfying that demand locally. So rather than just sit in class and take notes, I thought, why not take action? And so I started my first business in my fraternity room. I bought lacrosse equipment from the manufacturers. I printed out a catalog on my dot matrix printer. I know Henry knows what a dot matrix printer is. I don't know the ages of the rest of you. But needless to say, back in the 80s, it was a very analog time. There wasn't a lot of technology to enable a business to grow. I couldn't just build a website and sell what I was selling. So I printed catalogs. I mailed catalogs to teams all throughout the Midwest. And then I waited for the phone to ring. And the phone back then was a phone that was attached to a wall, which was attached to a cord. There were no cell phones back in 1985, certainly not the ones that we know today. And so when I was in class and that phone rang, it was answered by an answering service, and I wore a pager on my belt. And so while I was at class, if my pager vibrated, I knew that someone was trying to get in touch with me. I would call into the answering service on a payphone. I would get the information, I would call the customer, and I would transact. Needless to say, pagers were about the most technological advance that we had back then. There wasn't even a fax machine yet. So we did with what we had, and I built a business around it. But one of the things you learn when you start a business is that it's hard to get a customer. But once you get a customer, what you need to figure out is, how do you sell them other products, other services? And so I was selling them lacrosse equipment, but what else could I sell them? Well, I could sell them t-shirts and hats and jerseys and other screen printed apparel. And so I realized very quickly that there was a lot more money, better margins, and certainly a lot more transactions in apparel than there was in equipment. And being at a college, and being in a fraternity, every event required a t-shirt. You all remember your college days. I mean, there's no shortage of t-shirts to go around on a college campus. So I pivoted my business and went and started a company called University Sportswear. We did screen printing and embroidery for university organizations. We did it for local companies. And then eventually we got into licensed apparel as well for college sports. And that was really a turning point of our business, because by the time I left Champaign, Illinois, that business that started in my fraternity room was the 24th largest screen printing company in the United States. I had 80,000 square feet of manufacturing space. I had over 300 employees working for me. And I decided that I was going to sell that company. So I had my first exit event, my first liquidity event. I sold the business, took a dozen of my best employees, moved to Charlotte to start a NASCAR apparel business. And that business really took off. We set up operations in 1995. Within 18 months, we were doing over $20 million in revenue. And then I had my second liquidity event. I sold that company to a public company and then decided to take some time off and figure out what I wanted to do next. And I've always had a passion for creating things. I've also had a deep respect for intellectual property, but I was frustrated by the lack of accountability in bringing products to market. So in 2001, I started a company called Inventus. And what we do at Inventus is we design, engineer, develop, market, and launch consumer products and medical devices. We are located in Charlotte. We're over by the football stadium. And what we've put together is a group of people over the last 21 years who are exceptional at industrial design and mechanical engineering, at marketing, at branding, at building websites, at shooting videos, and most recently, launching products through crowdfunding. In our history, we've been involved in the development of over 2,000 consumer products and medical devices. We've helped launch over 450 new products and businesses into the marketplace. We've built a very impressive portfolio of intellectual property, hundreds and hundreds of patents. And through crowdfunding, we've generated almost $500 million now through Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about crowdfunding. And so I really want to cover 4 things with you. First off, the history of crowdfunding. How did it become what it is today? The different types of crowdfunding, because there are different forms of crowdfunding, not just running a Kickstarter campaign or raising equity through Start Engine or WeFunder or Republic. There's also the crowdfunding platforms, and there's different platforms for different types of crowdfunding. And then finally, we'll talk about the ecosystem. And so what's most important to understand is what is crowdfunding, right? So whether it's equity crowdfunding, reward crowdfunding, charity crowdfunding, loan crowdfunding, crowdfunding is when you get this group of people together. It's the collective cooperation. It's the attention. It's the trust by people who all come together. They network and they pool their money together in order to support efforts initiated by another person. So it uses word of mouth. It uses the wisdom of the crowd. It uses some advertising, of course, whether it's through Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn or some other social media platform. But it pools people together to support a goal. You may have a founder who has a great idea for a product, but he needs the support of the crowd to make it happen. You may have a charity where they're trying to raise money to take care of somebody, but you need the crowd to come together. And so the very first example of crowdfunding, at least the one that I can come up with, goes back to the 1800s, and that was for the Statue of Liberty. Now, we all learned in school that the Statue of Liberty was a gift. It was given to us by France to celebrate the United States and our liberty and our freedom. What most people don't know is that France gave us the statue, but we needed a base, a foundation to put the statue on. That didn't come as part of the transaction. And so there were a number of different sites that had been identified for where the statue should go. And ultimately, New York was awarded the location. But New York was required to go out and raise the money necessary to build the foundation where the Statue of Liberty would actually sit. And so in 1885, Joseph Pulitzer, who owned the New York World magazine or New York World newspaper, decided that he was going to go and personally help raise the money necessary to fund the creation of this platform. There was no social media back in 1885. There was no digital marketing. So newspapers were social media, right? Newspapers was really the only way people could find out what was going on because there wasn't TV back then either. And so what Joseph Pulitzer did is he put his appeal into his newspaper looking to raise $100,000 to fund the creation of this platform. And what he was looking for was any amount, whether it was pennies, nickels, dimes, or even dollars. He was looking for people to all come together and crowdfund this campaign. Ultimately, 120,000 people came together with their nickels, their dimes, their quarters, their dollars, and they raised a little over $102,000 to fund this platform. And the reward for backing the campaign was that the people who donated to the cause got a small figurine, a small statue of what this platform was going to be. So it was one of the very first examples of reward crowdfunding. Now, obviously, the best crowdfunder in the world is Elon Musk, right? He used crowdfunding as a way to determine whether or not there was demand for his Tesla vehicle. The way he used crowdfunding is he went out and he got deposits. He asked consumers to vote with their dollars rather than just their hands. And so he was able to generate $400,000 or 400,000 pre-sales of his car. He didn't get a full $35,000 per car, but what he got was a deposit. It gave someone a place in line. So then when the car was available, they could then pay the rest and actually buy the car. So there are 4 different types of crowdfunding. There's donation crowdfunding, which is when you're trying to raise money for a charitable cause. And that's typically done on a platform like GoFundMe. There are loan crowdfunding, where you are going out there and you are raising money to lend to someone, and that person pays back that money with interest. Lending Club is a good example of that. There's equity platforms where you raise capital, raise equity for your business in exchange for ownership of your business. So Start Engine is a great platform for that. And then, of course, there's reward crowdfunding. That's when you are going out there and you are raising capital around a reward. And typically the reward is the product that you're trying to raise capital to create. So we'll talk a little bit about donation crowdfunding. It's been very popular over the last number of years. Certainly we hear about the big examples of donation crowdfunding. When the Parkland, Florida shooting happened, which was a tragic event, a GoFundMe page was set up and millions of dollars, over $10 million, poured in from people around the world who are horrified by what happened. And this was money to go to the victims' families. Same situation when the terrible occurrence with George Floyd happened. A GoFundMe page was created and over $14 million was raised for a George Floyd memorial to make sure that something like this never happened again. In Las Vegas, when that tragic shooting occurred, over $11 million was raised for a GoFundMe campaign to help with the victims' families. And President Trump was even able to convince people to commit $25 million towards the We the People Built the Wall. Obviously, not much has happened with the wall, but the point is that if you have a donation platform and you've got a cause that is reputable and you can market it to a community that agrees with it, you can raise a lot of money through donation crowdfunding. You want to make sure that this is done for purely, nonprofit or for worthy causes. This is not a way to raise money for a business, but it is a great way to use the crowd to come together to support a wonderful cause. The one really interesting example of a donation crowdfunding that went viral was Karen Klein. She was a bus driver monitor, so her job was to sit on the bus, and the kids just tormented this poor lady. And one of the kids shot a video of how all the other kids were doing these terrible things to her. It went viral. One of the parents was appalled, set up a campaign, and what they were trying to do was raise $5,000. They thought if they could raise $5,000, they could give Karen a vacation. They ended up raising over $700,000, and Karen ended up retiring with that $700,000. So donation crowdfunding is typically, WeFunder, very good way to go out and raise capital for, charitable events. On the loan crowdfunding side, there are a number of platforms like SoFi, Lending Club, and Kiva. What these organizations do is they're an alternative to traditional lending. So if you can't get money from a bank, if you don't have the credit to do it, if you don't have friends and family who can lend to you, this platform or these platforms allow the crowd to come together and pool small amounts of money. And then the platform lends the money to you, and you pay back principal and interest, and they collect the principal and interest, and then they distribute that money less their fee to the backers, to the lenders. So you could, in theory, go on SoFi or Lending Club or Kiva, and you could say, all right, I want to lend $50 or $20 or $5 or $100. If someone was looking to borrow $5,000, they would aggregate all of these $10, $50, $100, $200 together and make a loan to that individual. And then as the person pays the loan back, the money goes back to the lenders, and they get some interest on it. The type of crowdfunding that I think most of you are going to be interested in are the last two that we're going to discuss, and that's equity crowdfunding and reward crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding is relatively new. It was actually enabled in 2012 by the Jobs Act that President Obama signed into law, but it didn't actually start occurring until 2016. So equity crowdfunding has really only been around for about 6 or 7 years. But the Jobs Act of 2012 legalized for the very first time where small businesses, entrepreneurs could raise money from outside investors by utilizing marketing. Prior to the Jobs Act, you couldn't market that you were trying to raise money. You couldn't put on a website that you were looking for investors. You couldn't go to a conference with a bunch of people in attendance and say, I'm trying to raise money for my business. Because if they were not accredited investors, then that was not allowed. Accredited investors are allowed to invest in high-risk investments because by definition, accredited investors have experience with these, they have a high net worth, they've got assets, and so it's, in the government's mind, safer for them to make those investments. The purpose of the Jobs Act was to let everyone else in the game, to allow someone who's doesn't have a net worth of over $1 million or a salary of over $200,000 invest in the same small businesses that accredited investors invest in. So they created different types of crowdfunding, 5 different titles of crowdfunding that each address a different problem related to small businesses and startups. And so the one that's most popular, regulation crowdfunding, allows you to raise up to $1 million, and you don't have to do it with accredited investors. You don't necessarily have to have audited financials. You don't have to have, years of history. And so that's become a very attractive way for some businesses to sell equity in their business. But you have to run it through an equity platform. These equity platforms are licensed by the government. They do all of the diligence. They do all of the documentation because what you're selling is a security here. You're selling ownership in someone else's business. And so WeFunder, Republic, Start Engine are 3 of the bigger crowdfunding platforms out there for equity. And so what they'll do is if you go to Republic or Start Engine or WeFunder, you'll see a bunch of companies that are trying to raise money. They'll have a pitch deck, they'll have videos, and they'll have an offering. They'll say, we're raising money at this valuation, and you can invest, for every $100 you put in, you get this amount of equity in the company. All of the transactions are done through the platform. All of the documentation for the investment is done through the platform. And then once the investment is made to the platform, then you receive your shares in the company. Equity crowdfunding is good for building loyal evangelists. The early backers of a business tend to be the most loyal. And so if you are opening a restaurant, for example, or a bar, why not go out there and sell equity in the bar or restaurant to your best customers? Because they're going to be your evangelists. They're going to go out there and they're going to tell all their friends about it because they're owners in the business now. They're probably going to eat at your restaurant a whole lot more frequently because it benefits them and benefits you. And so equity crowdfunding can be a great way to raise capital from your most loyal customers or from friends and family, or putting it out there in front of communities that may see value in your story, in your idea. And so equity crowdfunding, just understand it is dilutive, meaning that if you raise money using an equity platform, you are giving up ownership in your company in exchange for their investment. The big three are WeFunder, Start Engine, and Republic. So when you look at the total amount of money that's been raised through equity crowdfunding, the vast majority is raised through those three platforms. There are other companies out there as well, but WeFunder, Start Engine, Republic are the big three. And so equity crowdfunding, again, is a way to raise dilutive capital. You are giving shares of your company in exchange for dollars. What is not dilutive is reward crowdfunding. And this is the last form of crowdfunding that we're going to talk about this evening. Reward crowdfunding is where inventors, creators come together and they utilize the power of the crowd to launch a new product. So crowdfunding is typically around physical products, although on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo, you could do a crowdfunding campaign for an art project. You can do a crowdfunding campaign for an idea for a movie or a play. You could do, a crowdfunding campaign around software. What we typically focus on and what we, specialize in as a company are physical products, because what they're getting in exchange for their backing a campaign is the product. But what backers do in a reward campaign is they're essentially pre-ordering a product before that product even exists. So the campaign is launched on a platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. There is a description of what the product is. There's a story of the entrepreneur, the creator, and why he created it. There are renderings of the prototype and demonstrations of how the prototype works. And then there is a price. And typically the price is less than what the product will cost when it eventually goes to market. So there's this fear of missing out, that if you back the campaign now, you're going to be able to be the first to get this product, and you're going to get it at a price that is much less than what anyone else is going to be able to get it for when it actually is sold on Amazon or at retail. The campaigns typically last 30 to 60 days. There's a funding goal that's established. And if the campaign hits the funding goal, then everyone's credit card gets charged. The creator gets access to that money. And now they have the money to actually go and produce the product. And so crowdfunding, reward crowdfunding, becomes a really effective way for creators to fund something before they actually have to make it. That's the beauty of crowdfunding, right? Typically, if you're trying to sell a product, you've got to take all the risk. You've got to make the product. You've got to manufacture it. You've got to fill a warehouse full of inventory, sell it to customers, and then wait to get paid. With reward crowdfunding, you're actually selling the product and getting paid before you even make it. So you collect the money from the backers. Now you've got the capital to go to that factory, place the order, produce the product, and then eventually ship it to your backers. So it minimizes the amount of risk and capital that you're going to invest. More importantly, it gives you market validation. And so entrepreneurship is about minimizing risk and uncertainty. And so before you commit to making a product, before you commit to starting a company, it'd be great to find out whether or not people actually want the product that you've created. You can do a focus group. You could ask people. You can do surveys. But what a crowdfunding campaign does is it gets the customers to vote with their wallets, not with their hands, because they're literally buying something before that product even exists. And so when the campaign's over, you get access to that money. It reduces the need for venture capital because now you've raised money from your customers and you haven't given up any equity. It also allows you to build or piggyback on existing communities of backers. So there are lots of backers out there who like outdoor products or cooking products or storage and organization products or camping products. It gives you the ability to go out and promote your campaign through social media, through traditional media, through word of mouth. You don't have to build a whole website around this. So your campaign page becomes your page for your product. And it's relatively easy to set up through Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And so crowdfunding has become global. It's not just something that happens in the US. There are backers who back campaigns from all around the world. Obviously, the United States is the largest market, but campaigns originate from all around the world, and backers back campaigns from all around the world. And it's a big, big market. So these are Kickstarter's statistics. And as of this year, they've raised over $7.7 billion in Kickstarter campaigns. That's over 250,000 successfully funded projects. Successfully funded means that they actually hit the funding goal that they established for their campaign. There's been over 22 million backers who have pledged those $7.7 billion. Of those 22 million backers, 7.8 or over a third are repeat backers, meaning they've gone in and they've backed multiple campaigns. In total, there's been over 92 million pledges for reward campaigns. And these numbers continue to grow year after year after year. The important thing to understand about crowdfunding, and I want to kind of dispel the myth, is that the vast majority of campaigns raise less than $10,000. So if you look at it, less than 1,000 and less than 9,999, that is the majority of campaigns. What is the anomaly, right? The unicorn are campaigns that raise more than $1 million. And as much as you'd love to go out there and raise $1 million or more for your campaign, that is the exception, not the rule. Now, we have been fortunate in the thousands of campaigns that we have done. We've had, almost 100 campaigns that have done over $1 million. So our agency is the largest crowdfunding agency in the United States. We've raised more capital than any other company in the United States for crowdfunding. The secret is you got to spend money to make money. It's a dirty secret, and sometimes backers don't, or the creators don't have the money to spend. But what drives backers is marketing. You've got to run ads. You've got to get your message in front of more than just your friends and family. Most of the campaigns that are doing, less than $10,000, the creator probably built their own page, probably sent it out to all of their friends, put it on their Facebook page, and then hoped that they were going to get a lot of backers. Whereas these campaigns that did over 20,000 or over 100,000 or over $1 million, these campaigns used some form of marketing. They were using Facebook ads or TikTok or Instagram or other forms of social media to drive traffic. And so when you look at crowdfunding, there are certain categories that do better than others. Technology is one of the categories that drives a tremendous amount of money, right? So almost $1 billion in technology. Design, so product design products, also a very big category. Games, believe it or not, is a really big category. There's a big community within crowdfunding of people who love new types of games. And so whether it is video games or board games or card games, that's a big category as well. But crowdfunding has also been done very successfully, in the music industry, to crowdfund, ideas for movies, sometimes for publishing. Fashion's another big category. So you want to take a look at where the highest success rate is. And typically the highest success rate, is in things like games, in music, definitely in design, and some in technology. So I want to share with you some examples of crowdfunding campaigns and some of the lessons learned from those campaigns. The first one was a campaign that was done years and years ago by Zach Danger Brown. He decided, and this was in the early days of crowdfunding, that he was going to run a campaign to raise money for potato salad. Now, it's a crazy idea, right? Yet 6,900 people actually contributed to his campaign, and he raised $55,000. The lesson here is not that you could crowdfund anything. The lesson is that he launched his campaign on July 2nd. Does anyone have any idea why he would have chosen July 2nd of all dates to launch a campaign for potato salad? And please take yourself off mute if you have the answer. Well, the reason why he chose July 2nd is that a lot of people on July 2nd were probably going online and doing Google searches for potato salad recipes, because the 4th of July is a very popular time when people serve and consume potato salad. So the lesson learned from his campaign is that you should launch a campaign around the time when people are most interested in what the product is. So if he would have ran his campaign in August or March or in September or in December, a lot of people probably weren't searching online for potato salad recipes and therefore would not have stumbled upon his campaign. Remember, he spent money on marketing, on Google ads. And so when people typed in potato salad, they may have stumbled upon his campaign. Another lesson we learned is that sometimes a great campaign doesn't lead to a successful outcome. Ryan Grepper had an idea for a better cooler. In fact, not only was it going to be a better cooler, it was going to be the coolest cooler. He launched the campaign in the summer because he knew people were going to be looking for coolers in the month of June and July. But what he came up with was an idea for a cooler that had a built-in blender so you could make your margaritas. It had a built-in speaker so you could play your music. It had a built-in charger so you could charge your devices. It had wheels. It had a telescoping handle. It had a bottle opener. It was the Swiss Army knife of coolers. And when people saw this product and they watched the video, they're like, I got to have one of these. And 62,000 people, 62,642 people bought a coolest cooler before the coolest cooler was manufactured. In total, he raised over $13 million. So this campaign runs for 30 days. At the end of the campaign, Kickstarter sends to Ryan a check for $13 million. You would think Ryan's in the perfect position, right? He's got $13 million. All he has to do is go to a factory, open up the molds necessary to make these coolers, have them produced, ship them. Life should be great. The problem is that when he started talking to manufacturers, he realized that the cost to make the cooler, to ship the cooler, was actually more money than what he took from his backers. He sold the product for a little over $200 per cooler. It was going to cost him almost $300 to make and ship the product. And he had sold 62,000 of them. So every time he would fill an order, he was losing money. So he went to Igloo, he went to Coleman, he tried to see if they would make the product for him, and he'd give them the $13 million. They had no interest. And so he was in a real dilemma. He started making some, basically satisfying the most vocal people who were screaming and posting terrible things about him online. There were lawsuits. He then started selling some product online at a higher price, hoping that the profits from those would satisfy the losses on the others. But it was an example of make sure you know what your costs are before you launch your campaign, because what you could end up doing is running a campaign and losing money. Another campaign that had a little happier outcome was the Pebble Watch. This was a product that predates the Apple Watch. The backers or the founders decided to come up with a really cool digital watch that allowed you to change the face and it would connect with your cell phone. And so 68,000, almost 69,000 people backed this product. It generated over $10 million. And they were successful in not only making this product and distributing the product to the backers, but eventually the company was bought by Fossil. More recently, we were involved with the crowdfunding campaign for Flowhive. It is a backyard beehive where you set this up, you get a colony of bees, and there's a little spigot where you can just turn on the spigot and you fill up jars of honey. Over $12 million was raised in this campaign. 36,000 people saw this campaign and said, I want to have one of these, generating over $12 million. And then one that you may or may not be aware of is the Oculus Rift virtual reality headset. This campaign was launched over 10 years ago. It wasn't a huge campaign. It raised $2.4 million. It was only 9,500 backers that backed this campaign. But the real story here is that after the successful campaign, because remember, this was just an idea, right? They hadn't made the product yet. After this campaign was funded, Facebook saw this and said, we want to buy you. And they bought Oculus for $2 billion. So crowdfunding gave the market validation necessary to prove that there was demand. But I'm going to leave you with a crowdfunding story. And hopefully this is a story that maybe many of you have heard or you're familiar with the product. This is Josh Malone. And if you don't know Josh lives in Texas, where it is extremely hot, and Josh has a lot of kids. And in Texas, his kids love to have water balloon fights. And so Josh, being a good dad, would fill up a lot of water balloons. Well, the process of filling up a water balloon, if you've done it, is you buy a bag of water balloons. Typically 1,000 water balloons is like $1. They're very inexpensive. And you take one water balloon out of the package and you stretch the neck of the water balloon over a faucet or a hose. You turn the water on and the water balloon fills up. Now, if you put too much water in the balloon, you can't tie it. If you don't put enough water in the water balloon, you throw it and it doesn't pop. So Josh was trying to figure out the perfect way to fill a water balloon and do it faster than his kids were throwing them. And that takes a lot of coordination. So Josh came to us at Inventus with an idea. His idea was to take 35 water balloons, attach them to 35 straws with a rubber band. Those 35 straws would funnel up into one cap that you could attach to a faucet or a hose. You turn the water on and 35 balloons fill up simultaneously. Once they get the right amount of water in the balloon and they're heavy enough, they slide off the end of the straw and they're already tied with a rubber band. Now you're filling up 35 balloons in less than a minute. You could do 100 balloons in less than 2 minutes. And that becomes a lot more fun for the parents and for the kids. This was the original prototype package that Josh came up with. But Josh needed money. Josh didn't have the money to build a factory or the equipment necessary to make this. Each one of these he did by hand. So he came to us and said, I need to raise money. And we launched a crowdfunding campaign for him. And in 30 days, 21,000 people said, you know what? That's a cool idea. And they bought a product that wasn't manufactured yet. Josh raised almost $1 million, $929,000. And so now he had the money necessary to make the product, to ship the product, to deliver the product to his backers, and start a company. But instead, Josh was approached by a company called Zuru. Zuru is a toy company. And they said, Josh, we love this idea. What we'd like to do is license your intellectual property. We'll make it, we'll distribute it, we'll just pay you royalties. And so became Bunch of Balloons from Zuru. Last year, Zuru sold over 2.6 billion, billion with a B, 2.6 billion water balloons, which means a lot of mailbox money for Josh. Josh gets paid for every single sale that occurs, and he doesn't have to take on the risk of being an entrepreneur and making the product and shipping the product and hiring employees. So crowdfunding can be a way to launch your business, or crowdfunding can be a way to attract investors, or crowdfunding can be used as a way to license your intellectual property to somebody else. So that is the lesson on crowdfunding. Obviously, there's a lot of great information out there, and I would highly recommend that you look at some of the information that's available on our website, which is inventus.com. There's literally hundreds of hours worth of articles and videos and case studies that will teach you everything you need to know about reward crowdfunding. But I'm also leaving you my email address. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And at this point, I'd love to just answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Well, thank you, Louis. We would like to field some questions if there are any. I'll kick it off, though, while we wait for others to chime in. So if you would, could you speak a little more about the power of crowdsourcing? Because I think that, if not mistaken, that's at the heart of crowdfunding, right? It's you mentioned this earlier, the power, the value of the crowd. And of course, you know, Pulitzer back in the day was able to make use of his newspapers in order to gather a crowd together. Social media makes it a lot easier today. But if it wasn't for us getting to a tipping point around the use of the crowd, I don't think we'd be here with crowdfunding as an option.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately today, building a backer list, building a crowd, finding your tribe, your community is so much easier than it would have been before the internet. Your tribe could have been your church, your tribe could have been your community, your tribe could have been alums from your university or your high school. Today, you can find like-minded individuals all around the world. And so what tends to be very successful with these campaigns is when you identify a problem that really resonates with a particular type of individual or a certain type of customer. We've seen really successful crowdfunding campaigns around baby products, right? There are new parents out there who are struggling to figure out, how do I live? How do I care for? How do I, get through the day with my newborn child? And so there is a community out there. And so if you have a product that solves that problem, people resonates with that community. Same thing can be around social issues. It could be around something as simple as, water balloon fights, right? So find that community, whether it's online or offline, pull them all together, and that's where your initial support is going to come from.
Well, thank you. We have I'm sorry, we have a chat, a question rather, excuse me, from Nathaniel White, who asked, first of all, he says, great presentation. But he wants to know what the success rate of equity crowdfunding and how much is typically raised.
Yeah. So there are good statistics that you can find on each of the websites for Start Engine, Republic, WeFunder, et cetera, that kind of lists what their successes have been. You can also look at all of the campaigns that they've done and how much money has been raised. Just understand that you're going to spend money to raise money. On average, what I am hearing, what I'm seeing is probably about 20%. So if you were trying to raise, let's say, $100,000 on a equity crowdfunding campaign, you're probably going to spend $20,000 or $25,000 to get $100,000. Now, most of you are probably like, wow, that seems like a lot of money to raise $100,000, and it is. It's a ridiculous amount. Like, before you use equity crowdfunding, and especially if you're only trying to raise $100,000, go to friends and family, go to angel investors, because you're not paying a fee for those people when you're raising money. But the reason why some people can get comfortable with it is maybe they've already exhausted friends and family. They may have already exhausted the local angels in their community. They're trying to get this campaign out to a broader audience, a global audience. And typically what they're doing is they're raising capital at a higher valuation than what a local angel would be comfortable investing in. So when you've got small investors, they're not doing the deep diligence that an angel fund would do. If you go to one of the local angel groups in Charlotte, they're going to put together a committee. They're going to thoroughly review your business. They're going to look at what your valuation, your pre-money valuation is, and they may push back at the valuation. Whereas with equity crowdfunding, it's kind of take it or leave it. Like, we're raising money at this valuation. You either invest or you don't. There's no negotiations. And so that's why some people are comfortable paying as much as 20, 30% of the raise to get investors, because they probably overvalued the business by at least that much or more. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes. Thank you so much, Louis. Yeah, that's excellent information. Yeah, I was wondering about that. So thank you.
So why such a high percentage of the overall raise? Is that because that's the what the platform is generating, or is it because of the marketing campaign, or a combination of all of them?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of both, but it's mostly the marketing expense. The platform, I believe, takes about 6%. So there is a fee for having the platform do the transaction, right? They've got to do all the legal work. They got to put together the documents. They have to act as kind of the escrow agent in this process. But the bulk of the cost is marketing. And unfortunately, because it's a security, you can't pay a marketing company as a percent of what they raised. So you can't just go to a marketing company and say, all right, go run a bunch of ads for me, do some direct email campaigns, and I'll give you 5% or 10% of every dollar raised, because there's broker-dealer issues. And so you can't pay them, unless they are truly a broker-dealer, right? And they're registered, you can't pay them a percentage of what they raise. All you can do is just say, the marketing company will say, all right, we'll charge you $5,000 a month for marketing services, or $10,000 a month for marketing services. It can't be tied to how much is raised, which means if you raise nothing, you paid all that money for marketing. And if you raise $1 million, you got a great return on your investment.
Louis, you had mentioned to me some time back that you're actually in the midst of starting a crowdfunding platform. I hope I didn't spill the beans there, but if that is the case, is there anything that you'd like to share with us about what to expect with that?
Yeah, no, you didn't spill all the beans, but you spilled a few of them, and that's okay. We are looking at ways to make the experience of crowdfunding better. I mean, obviously, we've been doing this for a very long time. We have over 30 million backers who have backed campaigns that we have launched. We've learned a lot in the process, and what we're doing is we are creating digital resources that will make the experience better for creators as well as the funders. It doesn't compete directly with Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's more on the front end and the back end, before the campaign launches, after the campaign's over, also helping bridge from a reward campaign to an equity campaign. But we're expecting some really exciting things in 2024.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Louis before we say goodnight here? Anybody else?
Yeah. I got another one. So for the law that made this all possible, does it apply to U.S. companies, like you as a U.S. citizen funding a U.S. business, or can you use this law to fund like an international business?
I don't think that there's anything that precludes you from investing in a business that's launched on the platform that's in another country. But you know what? That's a great question. I don't know 100% for sure if that's the case. I don't think that there would be. I don't think that there'd be an issue with it. So I think it's okay.
The Jobs Act is a U.S. regulation, but you're saying that are you asking whether or not folks from outside of the U.S. can invest through through equity crowdfunding platforms?
Yeah, well, certainly outside investors from outside the U.S. can invest in U.S. companies, right? That's not an issue. The Jobs Act was really put in place to protect. Well, prior to the Jobs Act, you had to be an accredited investor. It was just to protect, grandmothers and people from being exploited by someone, selling a security in a company that was, just snake oil. Now you have to use these platforms, and now there's a limit to the amount that you can invest. I don't think that there is I think that international companies can raise money. International companies can raise money, through a reward campaign. I'm assuming that they can launch their business on a platform like Start Engine or WeFunder, but I will definitely look into that after this. And I think vice versa, if it's a U.S. company on a equity platform, I think someone outside of the U.S. can back it.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking more so of I'm a U.S. company, but the business, whether it's a subsidiary or whatever the case is, the business would be overseas. If I could still use these mechanisms to raise money for an offshore business, I'm just wondering if the business has to be conducted in the U.S.
Yeah, you've stumped me on that one. That is one question that no one has ever asked me before. I've never had a situation where we've been involved in that. Obviously, on the reward crowdfunding, it's not an issue at all. And we have done hundreds and hundreds of campaigns for companies that originated outside of the U.S., and we've collected millions and millions of dollars in campaign funds from people who are outside of the U.S. So from a reward standpoint, not an issue at all. Equity, I'm gonna have to look into that for you.
Okay, thank you so much. And yeah, again, I could probably follow up with some attorney to see if that's possible. But again, appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, it probably says it right on Start Engine or Republic's website would be my guess, or in the FAQs.
Okay,
I've
excellent.
just never looked at it. Yep.
As a matter of fact, we have, I believe it's Raj that mentioned that in India and other countries, equity crowdfunding is regulated, which stands to reason.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I guess that's it for questions and comments. And Louis, once again, thank you